So we're here at our beehive doing our monthly hive inspection. Let's go ahead and go through this hive together and see what's going on. Here we are, middle of the season. This is a pretty healthy hive making some honey, and let's see how it's doing. So the first thing I'm seeing is that our bees have now made it all the way to the top of this box. They're starting to store honey in these two frames right here. So I'll probably add another super since we're right in the middle of the honey flow right now, once I'm done with this inspection. You can see in this box, the bees are working all of the frames in this box. Everything's drawn, and they're storing honey in them right now. So we're doing really well. They're drawing really well. There's only the outside frames that haven't been drawn yet on this box. And I can feel there's some weight in there from that honey that's being stored. All right, we're down into the third box of this 8-frame medium. Now we're going to be getting into the brood chamber. So let's take a look and see what's going on here to see the status of our colony this time of the year. Well, you can tell that this process doesn't really take that long. I often tell my students that your inspection should last no more than 20-25 minutes. And once you really get going through them, you can easily do these in 10 minutes or so. You just got to know what you're looking for. So I'm just looking at these frames as I'm pulling them out. We've got a honey and food frame here, storing some pollen and some honey in this frame. Very next frame, we've got some pollen in here, some very young larvae, and some eggs. And so seeing those eggs in there, we got a frame of eggs on the back here as well. We know that we're queen right, meaning that that queen has been there in the last 3 days. I'm going to pull one more frame just to kind of see how the cap brood is looking. That uncapped brood looks really healthy, really nice. Let's see what our cap brood looks like. This is a cap brood frame right here. You can see a nice thick pattern right there. I can see that there's some brood out here on the outside. We don't look like we've got a good amount of pollen in here, but we're not getting pollen bound. Backside, same thing. You can see that. We got a couple queen cups on the bottom there. We go ahead and pull that open, see if there's anything going on in there. Nothing going on in there. They're just, those queen cups, they show up from time to time. They'll just have them on hand as they need them. But this is a good looking colony right here. I'm not going to really need to go any further at this point. I can pretty much close up this colony knowing that I'm queen right at this point. But there's one last thing that I've got to do as I finish up my hive inspection, and that's to do our monitoring for our varroa mites. So I'm gonna cut away from here, and I'm going to show you how to do that monitoring. Okay, before we get started with showing you the alcohol wash and the powdered sugar roll, I just wanted to cover the materials that you're going to need to do each one of these. So the powdered sugar roll, you're going to need powdered sugar. You're going to need some sort of a container that has a lid with a screen on it that's small enough to keep the bees in, but large enough to let the varroa mites out. And this is number 8 hardware cloth that you see here. And this is just a regular mason jar. You can see I've marked a line on here that is a half a cup of bees. That's the measurement of bees that we're going to use to do each one of these tests. The other thing for the alcohol wash that I have is I have another style of shaker, essentially. You can see it's a little windy out here, but this shaker right here allows me to fill with bees, again, a half cup of bees. I'll fill this with alcohol on the side with the bees, and then once the bees and the mites are separated via the alcohol, I then flip this over. The mites wash to one side, the bees stay on the other side with this separator that's in there. So same kind of principle, we're separating the mites from the bees, and then obviously we need alcohol to do this particular test. The other thing that you're going to need is some sort of a bucket that's white. The reason that you need a white bucket, particularly for the powdered sugar roll, is powdered sugar and mites are going to be shaken out into this bucket, and then we're going to use water to clarify it. And I've got a little bottle of water right here for us to clarify that. In addition, you can also, we're going to use this bucket to shake bees off of brood frames into here to collect the bees for our sample. Now that's one way that you can collect bees is by shaking them off into a bucket, letting the foragers fly away, and keeping those nurse bees that are going to stay down there below, and then filling up your testing jar with the bees that are in here. You can also use a half-cup measuring cup to actually to scoop the bees right off the frame. However, in order to do that, you need to have a square edge cup. And I'm going to be showing you this method here because this method is a little easier for most folks than doing the scoop method, which I'll show you at a later time. All right, so let's get started with our varroa mite checks. Okay, we got our mixed brood frame here. Let's go ahead and collect our sample of bees. Again, knocking them down into the bin. Those bees that are flying out, those are our foragers, not important to us. We're looking for nurse bees. We're going to fill up to our line on our cup. We're shaking these bees out in here. Check my line. Looking pretty darn good as far as the number of bees. Add a few more just to hit right at that line. You don't want to undersample, but you want to be pretty darn close. You don't want to oversample either. That's a good amount right there. I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on at this point. Keep my bees in there. Now we're going to go ahead and add our alcohol. And we're just going to pour that in there. And those bees die very quickly with that alcohol. We're going to go ahead and put our top on here. And we're going to go ahead and agitate it. And as you're agitating it, what's happening as the bees have died, those mites are now coming out from those segments and being separated from these dead bees. And what we're going to be doing is that through this agitation process, that separation, we'll then flip this whole thing over and then test the number or count the number of mites that are in there. So we're going to agitate this. And then, once you've agitated it long enough, then we flip this whole thing over, let that alcohol wash through, and then we look at the bottom and count the number of mites. And this colony, it's early in the season, and this colony has 0 mites per 300 bees. Now, if we didn't do this, we wouldn't know how many mites we had per 300 bees, and you may do an early treatment just because you thought you had mites, when in actuality you didn't need to do that at all. And again, those mite treatments can be hard on the bees, so you want to use them only when absolutely necessary, and this is the most reliable test to determine that. Okay, so now we're going to do the same process with the powdered sugar roll. We've got our sugar roll jar ready. You can see I've got my half cup line marked on there. I've got a mixed brood frame here, and I'm going to go ahead and shake these bees off, and we're going to collect our sample to test from. Again, nice firm shake there. The bees that are flying out, again, are your foragers. They're not what you're looking for. You're looking for nurse bees. And so let's go ahead and fill this cup with nurse bees. When you're trying to get them out, remember that if you just continually shake, the bees will fall out. All right, so I've got a nice half cup of bees there. I'm going to go ahead and put my cap on now to keep my bees in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple tablespoons of powdered sugar. This does not have to be an exact measurement. But what I normally use is my hive tool. You're going to take a couple teaspoons or tablespoons of powdered sugar. We're going to put it right on there and pack it through there. Getting it onto the bees. One more. Okay. So now we're going to roll the bees to get all that powdered sugar on there. And what we're doing as we're rolling this, making sure that the lid is facing up, otherwise you're going to lose your sample. But as you're rolling this, what's happening is the powdered sugar is coating the bees are heating up, and the mites are coming out from underneath those segments of the abdomen. And so what we're doing is we're separating the two. And then once the mites come out, they can't get back on to the bees because of the powdered sugar. So we've then created a situation where they're separated from one another. So we're going to roll that, and then we're going to set this aside in the shade to let that process happen of those mites separating. So I'm going to go ahead and set that right there. And then I'm going to come back to it after this period and then shake the bees. Meantime, you can clean up your mess here with all your powdered sugar. All right, so we're coming back to our bees after they've sat, and we're going to go ahead and shake these bees now. Get our frame there out of the way. So the bees have now heated up and the mites have separated. We're going to go ahead and take our white bucket again, get any stray bees that you might have out of there, take our white bucket again, and we're going to shake vigorously, but not hard enough to where we are hurting the bees. And this is where the powdered sugar roll is problematic, is the feel of the shake. It needs to be a good shake, but it can't be too hard, because if it is too hard, what you end up doing is hurting the bees, and they start to release venom, which then cakes up your sample and makes it worthless. So we're going to shake this. And once we're done with that process of shaking, you have a sample down on the bottom that is full of powdered sugar. That's where the water comes in. So we come in with the water, we rinse down that powdered sugar, and then that will make it so that we can see our varroa mites as that powdered sugar dissolves. And what I can tell you is that in this particular sample, we have 1 varroa mite per 300 bees, which means that we don't have to treat. Again, we wouldn't know that if we did this. We might actually just treat just for the heck of it. But that's not the way that we manage mites. We manage mites by testing, and if we are at the threshold, then and only then do we treat. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you at the next one.